Did you see that?
Quick nod to the people out there for the RBG love on the neck. If you've got a strong neck game, wear it, show it loud and proud. Yes, honor the pillars. Yes, yes, yes. um, have you been watching or listening to anything new since we last spoke?
On YouTube, I go and like listen to fun music on YouTube, and there's this, I guess he's a DJ or I don't know if it's a he, but a DJ or music producer mix songs and like create these playlists on YouTube. And they did a remix of old Kanye freestyles and interviews and like sync them up to beats. And it was kind of nice to remember what Kanye was like 15, 16, 17, 18 years ago. And just kind of taking old interviews of him and then like syncing that up to music, or old freestyles where he'd be on an interview and he'd just be like freestyling on the interview. And yeah, it was just like this, seeing his ambition. I wouldn't say like his innocence, but just, because he was never that. But but you know what I mean? He wasn't famous yet.
He wasn't whatever he is now. I don't think he was that then, or at least not as much.
Right. Yeah. So I enjoyed listening to that. It was like a 17-minute like little remix thing. I've been listening to more episodes of Dissect, which is a podcast that I like. Each season of the podcast, they take a different music album, and each episode they break down a song or two from that album. And so this season they're doing Childish Gambino's "Because the Internet," and it's a super interesting album to dig into because in addition to the music and the lyrics that are in the music, he also wrote a screenplay to accompany the album. And so basically, like when he released the album, there was a screenplay that he put up online, and it was a screenplay story. And then there were links to like silent videos that you would watch as you played songs at certain times. So like the album corresponds with the story. And I remember when this happened, when it came out 7 years ago, but it's just been fun to revisit this work and get a little bit more details that I didn't quite realize about just like the full breadth of what he was trying to do with the album. Like he wasn't just trying to release a music album where it's like you download an album, you listen to it and you move on. It's like, no, I want a screenplay. I want the album itself. I'm going to release a short film ahead of the release of the album that kind of sets up the characters. Yeah. And I didn't realize this at the time, but it's like he would be doing a lot of interviews in character. So he was Donald Glover or Childish Gambino, but he would be wearing the same outfit every time and taking on the disposition of the person on the album. Things that like people tell you when it's happening, but then when you have a chance to like go back after the fact and just see all the interviews, and it's just really, it's impressive. And so anyway, going through that podcast has been, it's been interesting, and it's kind of like, maybe inspiring is a word, I'm not quite sure, but it's just kind of like, it's a good reminder of, an album doesn't just have to be an album. A movie doesn't just have to be a movie. A play doesn't just have to be a play. You can find ways to blend in other mediums to make it like a full experience. Yeah. And while like maybe 95% of your audiences won't catch on that, like most people will probably never read that screenplay, for the 5% or the 10% or whoever that does, they really get a much fuller experience, and they're much likely to follow you to the next project. And so just kind of seeing how he was doing that, I mean, he was still, I'd say like a pretty big name when he released that album, but nowhere near what he is today.
Right.
And I feel like a lot of that is just because of just the quality work that he had released along the way. So, so I've really been enjoying that podcast, and I think they came out with a couple episodes this week. So
in that's called Dissect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is it hosted by other musicians or just like people who love music and break it down based on their own thoughts?
Yeah, so the podcast is hosted by this guy that I forget his name, but he's like a music theory person, and it's a Spotify exclusive now. So like it'll like episodes drop on Spotify, and then like weeks later they show up in other places.
Okay.
Like so, like your Apple iTunes or whatever it is. He's done like Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. He's done Damn by Kendrick Lamar. He's done Lemonade by Beyonce. You know, so like he's done a couple Kanye. He did My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy by Kanye. So he's done several albums, seasons. So yeah.
When I was hearing you talk about the Donald Glover / Childish Gambino album that they were dissecting on that episode, it made me think of how maybe not all of maybe the previous generation of musicians used to kind of put out an album and the vinyl cover was like a piece of art, right? That layered experience, but even more notable and maybe more specifically, like a Michael Jackson, right? Thriller was a whole experience, and so much of what he did, like They Don't Really Care About Us, that song, Dusting It Off, Black and White, Scream, they were like, I guess it was also the age more so of when the music video still really existed. You still get some now just because people need to sometimes have something to watch if it's a YouTube thing or whatever. Yeah. But it's not really the age of the music video as much anymore. Some folks are still doing it, but not like Michael used to do, right? And not like it sounds like Childish Gambino did / Donald Glover with that album, with having like the screenplay, the art, the music, right? It's all art. So like, and I wish more musicians would do that. I feel like the Gagas and the Beyoncés, they lean into it. Maybe even the Katy Perrys. But it feels more rare these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting revisiting that and just, you know, as you were mentioning other artists, I've also been listening to some Prince, because like his Sign of the Time albums, they release like this, you know what I'm talking about? Like they release like that super deluxe edition. I haven't been able to listen to all of it, and I don't know where specifically it's released, but so, and I'm not like a Prince expert, but just like what I was reading about it is like, as he was making Sign of the Times, he just like, it was just like, I mean, he's always been incredibly prolific, but that was like a particularly prolific time for him. So this album includes like 63 previously unreleased tracks. And so I imagine it's probably like a mix of live things, earlier versions of songs. And I was listening to some of those songs this week. And it's just so interesting hearing songs that maybe he released in a different form later, or was just like tooling and retooling. It's just super interesting. Just like the process that different people have.
You know, I love that point, because sometimes some musicians do this and some musicians don't. I love it when musicians put out an album and then put out like an acoustic version of the album with like maybe bonus acoustic songs, or maybe even just bonus acoustic songs at the end of a non-acoustic album. I love a broken down, deconstructed kind of grassroots version of a song. I think it's always so nice to hear it at its rawest form. And I think that goes for like the music, the singer, right? If you strip out all the processing and production, to just hear the true bones of the song on top of the true sound of just the instruments. And that includes like the vocals of the musician.
Yeah. Yeah. I found a link to the Sign of the Time super deluxe thing, and I dropped it in the chat. So like it's like this. I haven't gone through it myself, but it's like if you click on the link, it's like 92 songs, 8 hours of music.
Oh wow! This is, I love politics, but I don't necessarily want to bring politics to our channel or to our conversation. So I'm gonna like barely graze it to get to something really funny. I live to watch all of the hearings and the testimonies because there are so many and they're so easily accessible because everyone's at home and it's like everything is streaming on your phone or your tablet, your laptop. You can pull it up on your TV. You can listen to it. So I am loving listening and watching all of the addresses, hearings, and testimonies. Something that I get so much joy out of is what happens in the background of whether it's a Zoom shot or someone, broadcasting somewhere. It's like, what is that going on in the background? And is it on purpose? And that person knows exactly that they can be seen, or is it purely a happy accident that we're all able to enjoy whatever happens in the background?
Yeah.
I was watching someone, I don't remember exactly the journalist who was speaking or the person who was speaking who was centered in the shot actually doing this statement or whatnot. But it was in the background, it was like outside. And so in the background are these trees, and you can kind of in the distance hear like weed whackers and edgers. So like someone's working on the yard in the distance. But then around one of the trees, like imagine if this light pole was a tree, okay? And then all of a sudden, what this address or live broadcasting that was happening, this journalist or whatever, around this tree behind them comes this riding mower that this guy is on, and he just starts going around the tree. And I'm like, what is this gift that has just been given to all of us? It was so funny. But also I was like, yes, living for it.
Yeah. I haven't. That's hilarious. I love that.
Oh, I loved it.
That's the best. That's really great. Yeah, no, moments like that are special because I mean, certain types of Zoom meetings, certain types, pretty draining. So it's just like when something happens organically that's unexpected, that's not supposed to happen, that makes you laugh. It's just like brings such levity to it,
Yes, because Zoom exhaustion is real. So is world exhaustion. So yeah, it's just like being so grateful for the oopsie daisies and the uh-ohs. It really reminds you what laughing feels like when you forget to engage it on purpose.
Yeah.
Aisha, boyja. Um, do you want to finish talking about the most recent episode of The Umbrella Company?
I do. I'm going to grab my water bottle just so I'm all hydrated up when we talk about these crime fighting siblings, So I'm going to grab this water bottle just right.
Okay.
Got it.
I'm gonna refill my little beverage before we start so I don't have to like be awkward. At first I was like, this looks so bad with my knee in the shot, but then I was like, no, it doesn't. You better be editorial.
It's funny.
I am too much, or am I just enough? Oh man. Oh, there is a dog freaking out outside. He doesn't sound scared or injured, but someone is walking by who he does not like or something. It's much better than the like cat fights, literally the cat fights that I hear in the parking lot. Like middle of the night. We have a couple stray cats around my neighborhood. They are some dangerous cats. I mean, they own these streets. As soon as the humans go inside, I feel like it's the real life, no music needed cats. Because I'll just randomly hear in the middle of silence. And I'm like, oh my God, what y'all fighting over? Anyways, not important. So I think, I know sometimes we split up episodes. So we're finishing an episode that we were previously talking about. Had we just gotten to like, Luther had found Allison and found out that she was married, and like we ended up at Luther's house.
Luther talking to Allison's husband, and we were like talking about, oh, there's some holes in this relationship, as well as how they chose to film and depict the sit-in,
and how this one served its purpose in this sit-in diner scene, but definitely was a muted and almost funny version.
Get out. Was that what you were referring to? Get out. Get out.
And just one single person pouring politely over the heads of those sitting at the counter.
And then like the coffee cup that he pushed into her lap, and she's just like, ah.
And like the patience, because they started that shot when it was daylight, and the montage took us into the evening of that shot, and the cops very patiently waited outside of the diner until Ray got there, and that cup of coffee was so gingerly pushed into Allison's lap while sitting at the diner. Yeah. And that is what popped things off.
Yeah.
I think, did we already touch on Allison finally rumors someone at the end of this scene, because after that pops things off, and she like pops up from the hot coffee in her lap. The cops start like roughhousing with her, and then Ray is like, leave her alone, and then they get on him, and then they take him outside, and she kind of freaks out knowing like what is about to potentially happen.
Yeah.
And then to stop it, she finally rumors someone for the first actual time in season 2.
Yeah. And it's really interesting watching Ray's reaction to that, because he's more, it's weird. It's like, it's almost like he's more scared of her than he was of the beating that he was getting. It's almost like he anticipated getting beat up. He's like, something might go down with the police tonight. He's well aware of that. But when he sees what happened with her rumoring something, he does not understand what's happened. And also it's just like earlier in that scene when he shows up, he's just come from meeting the second of her brothers.
Yep.
And then so it's like that gets brought up, and then
during the sit-in, I'm like, Ray, not the time.
Yeah, and then like to us anyway, moments later, he sees this thing happen with her, and he leaves. He's gone.
He does. He totally is. I think you hit it on the nose. He's like more scared of her doing that, seeing her do that, and it's not like it's a violent doing of said rumoring, but just the sheer fact that she did her rumoring and made this big white racist cop in the scene simply stop and walk away really frightened him, and you can see him be fearful of her, his supposed wife for a year, right? I'm not currently married. I'm not just gonna be walking away from my mate because of that. Like, because again, it's not even like, is it shocking? I'm sure, yes. But it's not like she murdered someone in front of him or maimed, assaulted. She didn't kick a baby. Uh, she didn't cut the legs off of a dog. Right? These are things that might make you go, oh, what?
Not to defend Ray, but I think that they do a decent job of explaining it the next time he shows up. So when Allison finally does confront him in the hairdresser and they take it outside and he's just like, who are you? He thinks that she's a spy. And that I was like, okay, I get that. Because that's what was being done in some circles where it's like they'd send in people to, break groups up from the inside or to try to get intel and things like that. So in his mind, he's just like, nothing's added up about this person over the last 24 to 48 hours. And maybe I just didn't see it. And so not to like defend him per se, but it's like, I thought that was an interesting way of handling how he responded, to those moments. And not to like, I guess I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but it's just like when he confronts her about it and is like, please explain, she doesn't.
Yeah, she really doesn't. And I think she does herself a disservice because she really had the opportunity to come clean, even though that could have been hard. And it's not like she's coming clean about murder, assault, or maiming. Like, it would have been, I can't speak for her or her character, but as a viewer, it seems like it was a misstep for her not to just say, because he had already seen it. He had already met these now 2 other random siblings. He's already on to you. He's already frightened. He's already pushing you away / pulling away. Why not just tell him? Side note, on the front end of that diner scene, you mentioned like he had just come from, because he showed up to the sit-in late. I say late, right? He had gotten out of jail. She knew, we already talked about this last episode of our show. She knew he was getting out, but in how they wrote this scene / episode, what a mistake with the timing. It had to have been on purpose, but I think it was a misstep in the episode because she worked with Klaus to get him out, but then didn't wait for him and went ahead to the sit-in that he still knew what was happening at the regularly scheduled time and place. Yeah. But still, in the end / when the sit-in happened, after he meets Super Strong Bro Luther at the house and finds out, okay, this is the second of 2 like rando siblings, he shows up to the diner late for the sit-in, but already mad. I didn't like that because, again, not the time or the place. Right? I felt like he brought that energy into what didn't need to be there.
Yeah.
And I do think that was intentional as well on the part of the writers, writer's choice, whatever. But they also had Allison's reaction pick up on the anger he brought into the diner. Because she went to like hold his hand or something and he like pulled away. And I was like, that's too much, friend. But all of what you said is still valid. I just wanted to touch on that, like the energy he brought into the diner. And I think, yes, people respond how they respond when they don't yet understand what's going on. But damn. Yeah. All that to say, she rumors him out of a dangerous situation. Klaus pulls her away at the end of the scene. Ray runs away. And it's like, I can't be around you. I don't know you. And so I think that is kind of the where that scene ends. I know we'll touch back on when they meet back up, but I think the trajectory of the episode, I think that's where that one ends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
I think we next see like Klaus driving up to and then entering a hardware store. I must say, I did not understand the importance or prevalence of this hardware store insertion into Klaus's storyline here in season 2 until I can't say until this episode ended. I started to along the way through the dialogue between Klaus and Deadbro, Ben. But it did take me a second to realize what was going on with this hardware store Klaus storyline. Did you have that experience, or did you pick up on what this ends up being kind of right away?
You know, I don't remember, because like I was like going back and rewatching it, knowing why he's doing that. So I don't remember what my feelings were first watching it. Yeah, I don't remember like what information I had or didn't have. I feel like I may have remembered his face though, just from season 1.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think that probably would have been one of the telltale signs. I definitely didn't remember his face. And the he we are speaking of, people watching, the people, is Dave or David. I think they refer to him as both, but most commonly Klaus refers to this character. We see him going in there, inevitably the reason he goes to this hardware store, and inevitably why he even like the big why behind this story point, this point in the storyline, is that in season 1, in the regular timeline of the Umbrella Academy, Klaus goes to war. I want to make sure I get this right. The Vietnam War,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And whilst there, don't you love that word? Whilst.
Oh yeah. I was like Vietnam.
But whilst Klaus is a soldier in Vietnam, he meets, again in the typical timeline of the Umbrella Academy season 1, he meets Dave and basically falls in love. They fall in love with each other in season 1, but while in war as fellow soldiers, Dave is killed in action. And so in season 2, we see Klaus go to this hardware store literally to find Dave, because he remembers from the original typical season 1 timeline that this is like, oh yes, because season 2 leads up to the kind of assassination of Kennedy in the timeline of history. And so Klaus remembers in season 2 that in season 1, Dave said he joined the army after JFK was shot, because it was the catalyst for him wanting to enlist. So he's trying to save his life by changing his mind prior to knowing when he decides to join up. Mm-hmm. All the while, Ghost Bro was like, don't do this, man. It's going to mess with your head. It's going to mess with his head. And like, you know better than this. You're trying to mess with something that you already know is going to happen. Don't do it. But Klaus does it anyways. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting. I think we find out more later on. But again, just thinking of history, and again, how reminiscent of today, which is just a different point in history, it is, and how people are. Dave in the storyline in season 2, because it's now in the 60s, does not acknowledge his own attraction to Klaus yet. He denies his sexuality, and everyone's sexuality identifying journey is different. But in the storyline, season 2, Dave does not know Klaus, does not know himself, one might say, yet.
Yeah, seeing Dave pop up, especially a little later in the diner, it's a tough scene to watch.
Oh my gosh, yes, that diner scene. I was like, oh no, I don't want to watch it.
Yeah.
Man, yes. So Klaus basically buys some paint as an excuse at the end of the dialogue between him and Dave, who doesn't know him, at the hardware store. He's like, I'm here for paint. And so he ends up buying a couple gallons of paint.
Yeah.
When he leaves, Ghost Bro in tow, right? Because they roll together. And they get back in the car. Klaus noticeably sees cop cars roaring by, sirens on, and goes, Allison, because he just kind of sort of in a previous scene came from talking to her, knows she's going to go to the sit-in, so knows that the cop cars are headed to the sit-in to cause trouble, as they do.
Yeah.
We cut to what we've already kind of touched on, and so don't have to harp on, but that's when we cut to the rest of that diner scene where Ray joins Allison, brings in that, like, I'm not feeling you and these secrets energy. Shit pops off. They head outside. She rumors the cop, saves Ray from a beating. Ray is horrified, runs away. And then Klaus, now having in this end of diner situation scene, carries Allison off in a way to make sure, hey, 1, we gotta go, we got stuff to do, and 2, this is not a good place to be, come with me, right? We cut back and forth between like this diner scene and Luther's like big fight that is happening simultaneously, same evening, different part of town, because Allison and Luther haven't seen each other yet. Though they know each other, are there now. Ray has told Allison, I met Klaus and Big L.
Yeah,
and
he
so
described him like a lost puppy dog or something like that. A very accurate description of Luther's energy this season.
yes.
Yeah.
And we know that Luther's got this big fight this night because his boss helped him find Allison's address so that he could have his head on straight for the fight that night, that his boss, like typically in this season 2 does. He's got money on the fight and he needs his right-hand man, fighter Luther, to be in a good headspace. He is not. Things did not go well. So he's in a very bad headspace. So the cutting back and forth between the chaos of the sit-in and the cops and all of that, and what's going on between Allison and Ray, we also are cutting into Luther's fight, in which he's not doing great. But he's kind of not doing great on purpose. He is actively thinking about Allison.
Yeah.
And Ray, and that whole thing is really taking him out of the fight until he makes that conscious choice during this back and forth to just take the hits. It's like he's so strong or whatever. He wants to feel the pain. And so he's like, hit me again. And he's just like taking these huge hits. There's one that's so kind of comical where the guy he's fighting is not a super bro and in any way is just like another big bad fighter, but nobody's Luther, right? But Luther's just letting him pummel him. And there's this hit where the guy's like, uppercut, and clocks Luther right there. And Luther, he takes off. I wish I had he like, if this is Luther, wait, is this the right way? Yeah, okay. So if this is Luther, he takes the hit and he's like, woo! And he like flies through the air slow motion. And I'm like, is this the place for that shot? Is this? But I mean, I think it's just the drama of that, taking that big hit and flying through the air and then hitting the ground, right? And Five and Vanya are in the crowd watching Luther's fight because the three of them are together in this episode at this point. So they're watching him and they're like, why isn't he fighting back?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems that like he's so dejected he just wants to feel some kind of pain, or maybe he wants someone to knock him out. It's one of those, a combo of the both. It's interesting though. I mean, it's interesting. It says something interesting about Luther, and I don't mean like in a good or a bad way. I'm just saying it's interesting that going into a fight, rather than like taking out his anger on someone, he'd rather get beat up by someone. You know?
I think it says so much about the character of Luther. Mm-hmm. And it's like a carryover from season 1 into this now like sad puppy dog version of him in season 2. He just wants to feel something at any point in the season, I think, whether it's he just wants to feel important to his dad, he just wants to feel a connection with Allison, he just wants to feel, you know, a team with his siblings, he just wants to feel whatever, but he just wants to feel. And I think I asked you / the viewers this previously, but it's like, there was a time, I think it was when we were talking about like the how and why Allison took so long to how she didn't die when Vanya sliced her throat, first and foremost. And then the length it took her to recover, but she fully recovered. And so my thought was like, are these super bros indestructible? I think we kind of talked about, like, are they self-healing? And although I think our answer was, in the end, nah, not really, they do have a certain resilience in their makeup. And I don't know if it's just because Luther is super strong, bro, right? He's like literally 8 feet tall and not just muscles, but like he is a muscle, right? He's just, and hairy, right? He's just huge, physically huge super bro and super duper strong. And so it's like, can he not feel pain literally or more so metaphorically? I think mostly metaphorically, but a little bit of literally.
Yeah.
He is so complicated because, again, in season 1, we know he spent some time living on the moon, on the dark side of the moon, because his dad had like secret stuff going on up there and kind of tricked him and told him he was on a super important mission and needed him to go to the moon, but really he was just like, I need you to be somewhere else. And I know you need to feel important, so let me help you feel important, which is basically how he sent Luther to the moon for quite some time.
Yeah. It's really interesting thinking about the difference between season 1 Luther versus season 2. It's kind of like you have season 1 Luther who's just like, in my opinion, came across as very sure about everything, saw himself as the leader of the group. And now in this season, I mean, he kind of spells it out in that first episode when he runs into Five. He's just like, man, the world, man, who cares? I just don't want to be in the middle of it. You know what I mean? Like, he's in a totally different way.
Poor thing. Because like after he takes that big old hit that sends him through the air and he lands like basically on his back, he doesn't land on his feet. No cat in him at all. It's so, the imagery of it, with at least the landing when he lands on the ground, because he lands on his back, the shot is him looking up at the moon in this like very calming energy, right? has lost, I think, the fight is what this is. It's like a huge fight that his boss was counting on him to win. He finds this moment of solace in loss because he's flat on his back and looking up at the moon. And I was like, y'all better do some imagery. And I think that's where that scene ends. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have his siblings watching, or at least a couple of his siblings watching, like, why doesn't he do anything? I think they're just kind of like making it very clear that everyone is confused. Everyone's caught off guard. Even the first person he's fighting, he punches them a couple times. He's like, am I getting a hit in? Like, is this working? All right.
Oh my gosh. Let's see. Oh, yes. You know what? Maybe what did we just say we were this a second ago, maybe not a second ago, but maybe a couple minutes ago, I was like, oh, I think this happens later in this episode, but I see my notes about to end, and maybe it doesn't. What was that thing we were talking about that happens later?
Oh, were we referring to the diner scene?
Oh, yes. That must be the next episode, because I don't have any more notes.
Oh, okay, cool.
After this last scene. That just means the people got to tune into our next episode. The next scene I have happening, and I think it's the last one, is we cut to Lila and Diego post boink. They have touched their bodies in their naughty places. Because they are post boink, still in the bed. You can feel the happy feels, and Diego is like passed out. They're like, but he's asleep, right? She sneaks out.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And either earlier in this episode or the last episode of the show, we saw the handler, go into that pet shop and kind of focus in on this fish tank that had this little, like fish tanks do, little like treasure chest, fake treasure chest in it. And it goes unexplained. We told you the moment would come back. It's back. Because when Lila sneaks out of the bed that her and Diego just boinked in, she gets dressed, she sneaks, kind of outside and to the pet shop. And I'm watching going, I remember that pet shop. What you doing? Oh my gosh, what you doing there, Lila? I was really like, y'all better get me at the last minute. Because you really are left with questions the first time we're in this pet shop. You're like, what was that scene all about? You find out in this scene because Lila walks into the pet shop. And let it just be said, if you haven't watched our previous episodes, one, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, yes, and like all of our videos, and just go back and watch the previous ones also, because Lila also walks in, and after some suspect things have happened earlier on in the season, as we get to know her, she walks into this pet shop. She also walks up to that same fish tank. She literally reaches inside to that treasure chest, and it has a hotel key in it now. And so you're like, the handler left a key, and is like, what? Right? You're thinking, because the last time you see this pet shop and that treasure chest is with the handler. So you're like, this has got to be related. And so you see Lila kind of get that hotel key. She walks down the street into a hotel, uses the key to the room that is for, walks in like she's comfortable, right? Like she knows exactly who's going to be there. You're thinking, who's in this hotel room? And she's talking again very comfortably and casually. Hey, can I order room service? And you're like, oh, you got another like a boo, a family? What is happening?
Yeah.
Mark, tell the people.
It's the handler.
It's the handler.
And not only that, she says, "Hey, mom." You're like, what?
It's her mom. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Did you see that?
Oh my gosh. I was shocked. I was like, oh, shnikey. I'm still like, just talking about it. This is how I felt. I was like, oh, snap. Because it all starts to come together. All of the weird things you have noticed, you have seen Five be very suspicious of Lila for good reason. You've even seen Diego, who fought falling for her, who also along the way has some suspicions of like, how can you fight like that? How did you learn to do that? And earlier, Lila answers truthfully in a way that a double agent would, right? You got to, answering with the truth will get you very far as long as you tell the right amount of truth at the right time, right? As I think most double agents kind of work with, because then you're not lying, you won't have a tell, things like that. She told Diego as they were leaving the psych ward and escaping, they were like fighting off the guards and the police in the basement, and she pulled some like sick moves, and Diego was like, how did you do that? Who taught you how to do that?
Yeah.
She answers, my mom. Or like, where did you learn how to do that? And she goes like, my mom or whatever. And you go, huh, maybe she grew up on the rough streets of Detroit or whatever. You don't think, oh, she's got a super sort of mom as well. And it's the handler. But you also, I think, in all these fields, potentially one might also go, oh no, she's infiltrated the super sims because she just boinked Diego, so she's got her hooks in him finally, right? It's not as cute as it was prior to you finding out as a viewer that her mother is the handler. You know that there's a bigger story because it's not like they're twins or that they are visually, related. So you know that there's a story behind that, which we find out later. But it just goes, oh no, right? I definitely had so many feels at the same time, and oh no was definitely one of them. What about you, Mark?
I was just like, oh, the handler has like a real part to play in this, like a big part to play, one that maybe I didn't quite realize. I think I went into the season sort of like underestimating the handler as a character. Yeah. And Lila too. Lila as well, honestly. I mean, like I didn't know what to expect from either of them really, because it's like the handler you assume is dead, and then they're back, and it's like, oh, who knows what this person's gonna do. And then Lila, same thing too, right? This strange, like, I'd say like a strange person that pops up out of nowhere, seemingly kind of knows how to fight. You don't really know a whole lot other than that they've had like a difficult past. So when you see that those two are linked, you're like, all right, well, something's up, So, yeah, and is more in the next episode, not really this episode, but you realize quickly that what Diego and her have is real, but also like what she has with the handler is also very real, and how that's going to be a problem.
And I think the idea of like real is subjective to the characters potentially, and to maybe the viewer. Yeah. Because although, like you mentioned, we find out more in later episodes that what Lila and Diego have is real, and what Lila and her mom slash the handler have is real, but they both have such huge variables of performative realness, because you think no matter if a double agent falls in love along the way, they are still a double agent. And did you ever really know who they were? And were those intentions pure? You know, because that kind of thing happens. Clearly, we find out later, and we'll, I'm sure, discuss more about how the feelings Lila and Diego do have for each other. They do have for each other. But similar to what happened with the disintegration or seeming disintegration of feeling like Ray doesn't know Allison, totally shook his world. Not only can she do this big, wild, thing, right? That is basically like magic to him, kind of, sort of, right? You see how that immediately cracks the hull of what is in this storyline, a very strong couple that has been married for a year. And episode 1, if you go back and watch our episodes, you hear us talk about how, like, it's so cute. And you think to yourself, seeing the Allison and Ray relationship first introduced in season 2, yes, Black love. Yes, cuteness. Yes, she has made a life for herself. And they're both these activists and civil rights, like, pillars in their own time, in their own way. And then you see what secrets can do, what a secret that often one secret leads to other secrets did to them in just the previous scenes, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think as the viewer, and I think this is in our previous episodes as well, or at least we gloss on it, touch on it a little bit, you kind of feel bad for some of the siblings for different reasons. And you already kind of feel bad for Diego. You were, I feel like, maybe just starting to think, he finally, combine two words, he finally found a little piece of joy that is just his, right? Because he kind of got the Captain Planet heart equivalent of the powers. He has his hero complex. You just don't think or see a lot of great things for him. And you think maybe he has found one. He was fighting the feelings in the first couple episodes of season 2 that were kind of growing between him and Lila. And then you see them, like, go to Boink Town, and you're like, yes, get a brochure. Yes, go back often. Yes. Don't send me any postcards, because I don't want what you send. You keep that in your pants. But I feel like you just got a taste of joy for Diego. And then it is, as the hole was cracked with Ray and Allison due to not really feeling like he knew all of her or a huge part of her, that potentially the same thing is going to happen with Diego and Lila. Because Lila has already seen Diego's and some of his super sibs powers, and we come to find out she already knows later on. But it does seem like there is if there was going to be a loser and winner in both of those companion situations, the super sibs, they both lose, the super sibs in each relationship and the other one. But it just feels very complicated, and you're like, dang, super sibs have problems too. Mm-hmm. And I also think, maybe thinking more about Lila, I was kind of sort of starting to like her, even though I didn't fully understand her role, right? You kind of think, and I think you described her really nicely a couple episodes of ours ago, that she just has this almost, this is fun, or like, I'm just Lila, I'm cooking and I'm gonna break a window. Woo, let's go. I don't care. Oh, you're popping into a timeline into my back seat, fine. No worries. We should trust him, right? She just like, okay, cool. All right, cool. She's like comedic relief almost.
Mm-hmm.
But then you go, no, double agent alert. Double agent alert. So much happening.
Yeah. And I think like that's probably why you see why she's into someone like Diego, because Diego, to a fault, is just himself all the time.
Yeah.
You couldn't be a double agent if you wanted to. You know what I'm saying? Like he just can't. Like it's not like he doesn't want to lie. He's just not really good at it, you know? And so you can kind of see how they're sort of perhaps drawn together, where it's just like Lau's like, wow, he's so straightforward, and he's just like, I can't figure this person out. I don't get you. You know what I mean? So, you know, yeah.
Oh my goodness. I will say the Umbrella Company. Oh,
Yeah.
I do that all the time. The Umbrella Academy.
Yeah.
They're working on a spinoff called the Umbrella Company. No, they're not. Not that I know of. I do want to say that like the Umbrella Academy has a really great way of not only hooking you with suspense at the end of season 1.
Yeah.
But they successfully, I think, do that at the end of every episode.
Mm-hmm. I'd be really interested to know like how episode structures have changed, because I gotta imagine that they have, because while I'm sure like act structures are probably similar, like I would imagine that there's still like a beginning, middle, and end and things like that. If you're writing a show on Netflix, you're not writing with commercial breaks beaten in. I mean, I guess you could, but because you don't have to be beholden to that, I'm just kind of curious how that changes the arcs of certain episodes. And of course, for like the narrative Netflix pieces, you definitely have like those big reveals. But also, and this isn't so much for Umbrella Academy, but for other streaming like drama shows, it'll be like this really slow crescendo to then like ending on a bang to try and then hook you for another season. Like I think about that when I watch like Ozark. You know,
I've never seen that.
I'd be interesting to hear what you think about that show. But shows like Ozark, I'm trying to think of like another example, but that's one that just comes to mind because it's like a Netflix original show where they get like 10 episodes a season, and yeah, I don't know. I'd just be curious to hear like how, if and if so, how people re-envision the structure of like television dramas in particular. I don't know if I noticed much of a difference with like comedies per se, but you know.
I wonder if it is maybe a Goldilocks zone of like how one might write a scripted play, because you don't necessarily have commercials, but you have an extended series of scenes.
Yeah.
And then the act ends or the half ends, or maybe it's a play in 3 parts type of thing, which feels a little bit more episodic, similar to a Netflix joint. So I wonder, like, I don't know. I feel like the type of writer, I know you write probably a lot more than I do, the type of writer I am, and maybe it's because I'm still discovering the type of writer that I am, I write what I want, how I want it written, and then I often will go back and restructure if and where and when needed based on what has preliminarily become the result, and comparing and contrasting that to if it is what I want that end result of that process to be before moving on. So I wonder if when you do something or pitch a project, write something for Netflix, if they're just like, I can do what I want because it's Netflix. Because I kind of feel like that. If you want to do a series that is 30 minutes an episode for 5 episodes. You can do that. You don't want to do that? How about one movie an hour long? No? How about a mini series of 8 episodes, each one an hour and 37 minutes long? Yeah? Okay, here you go. Have fun. I really feel like there's such variety in a good way of the things that are on Netflix. It's not just like only 30-minute shows, only whatever. It's such a wide variety. And even I think we talked about with the Umbrella Academy episodes, they're not exactly the same length. They're 40 to 46-ish minutes. And I'm like, do you episode. When you think you need to end, you end. Voyager, look, we did it. Another one.
Yeah.
Well, for the viewers, I hope you're having a good time. I don't think we have that many yet, but we are growing channel. Continue to watch us and tell people about us. Like our videos and subscribe to our channel. Yes, subscribe to our channel. You know you want to do it. Yeah, I think that's it, right? Yeah?
It's great.
All right. Well, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but what I do know is that this has been another episode of Did You See That? And shout out to the notorious RBG. Hashtag Justice for Breonna Taylor, because it's always a good time to say that. Thanks for watching. Bye. Did you see that?